My 11-year-old son was in a horrible accident 4 months ago. I don't want to get into specifics of what happened, but it left him with a disfigurement of third-degree burns all across his face, as well as his head and his upper torso. The first week at the hospital were the worst days of my life. I can't even begin to imagine how bad they were for my son. He wouldn't cry underneath those bandages. He wouldn't even speak. He sometimes just let out an agonizing, moaning sound. I asked my doctor in hysterics what had happened. I was eventually able to get out of him that my son was in absolute excruciating pain, and that movement of his mouth or face made things dramatically worse. So he just sat in silence. The thought of that still haunts me. To be in such indescribable pain, and have it just sit there, moment by moment, with no escape or distraction. The doctor explained that they were medicating him as best they could, but there was only so much that they could do. When they first took the bandages off my son, I screamed out loud. And I really didn't mean to. I thought that I was prepared for the worst, but I wasn't. I was horrified. I couldn't even look at him. It made me feel sick to even think about his appearance. My son was speaking again by this time. "It's that bad, Mom?" he asked, his voice quivering. And we showed him a mirror. And he remained silent. He didn't even speak. He just sat in silence for hours, ignoring us. And eventually he looked at me. And I immediately turned away. I couldn't help it. And quietly, almost like a mouse, he said, "They're gonna fix me. Right, Mom? It'll be okay, right?" I couldn't lie to him. But I also couldn't tell him the truth. Instead, I did something worse. I cried. I lowered my head in my hands and I cried. My son stayed in the hospital for months. Various skin grafts were attempted, but they didn't help. In fact, they somehow made my son look even worse. He barely looked human any longer. The members of my family and some of his friends wanted to visit him, but he refused. He wouldn't even consider it. He told me that he never wanted another person to look at him ever again. He said that he never wanted to leave the hospital room. Ever. But of course, the time eventually came for him to return home. And at first, things were sort of okay. He holed himself up in his bedroom playing video games. It was a great escape for him. He wore a hat and sunglasses at all times, and it actually helped. At least a little. The hospital set him up with a psychiatrist to help him cope with his new reality. Last week, the psychiatrist met with me privately. He told me that I can't keep sheltering him in his room. That I need to get my son out and into the world. That he needs to slowly learn to accept his appearance. And so a few days later, I decided to take him downtown. We'd have lunch and we'd walk on the beach. Took a lot of convincing, but my son eventually agreed. He put on his usual sunglasses and hat, and we went outside to the bus stop. I could tell that my son was worried. And honestly, I was worried as well. We both had no idea how the world would react to him. We got on the bus and sat down in the front. The seats were sideways in this area, so the rest of the bus was looking at us. A little girl that was near us looked at my son. She grabbed her mother and she looked at my son again and almost started crying. She whispered to her mother. And her mother picked her up and gave me a "I'm sorry" look and took her daughter to the back of the bus. Did my son see that? I didn't know. We had only moved a couple of stops, but already I noticed other people pointing, whispering. People looked disgusted. I was hoping so much that my son wasn't noticing. But when he quietly whispered, "Mom, they're looking at me," I whispered back to him, "No, they're not. Everything's okay." But then he got louder. "Mom, everyone's looking at me. They're all looking at me." And some of the people sitting near us got up at that point, and they moved away from us. "Mom," he continued. He was almost yelling now. "They're all looking at me. They're staring. They're staring." "Calm down," I tried telling him. "They're only looking because you're yelling." I saw a teenager pull out his phone and start recording us. "No!" my son shouted. "That's not why they're looking. They were already looking. Let's get off. I want off." The little girl at the back of the bus was now crying loudly. "Okay," I said, and I pressed the button and flagged the next stop. "They're looking at me!" my son continued, almost yelling. "I want off now! I want off! Take me home! Take me home!" Some people were now laughing about the situation, and then I lost control of myself. I didn't even know what I was doing until it was too late. I screamed loudly and piercing in heuristics, "Stop staring at my son!" And the entire bus went silent. Everybody was looking at us. The driver had pulled over and we weren't even at a stop. "Ma'am, can you and your son please exit the vehicle?" We were both crying now, and we walked home. That night, I ordered a package online. That night was also when his nightmares started. He would scream in the middle of the night and in his sleep. Wailing screams. He didn't even know that he was doing it. They would keep me up at night, you know. He would tell me what the dreams were about. But sometimes when he woke up, I'd hear him crying, talking to himself. His voice was quivering. This was when I first noticed that I was actually becoming scared of my son. I said earlier that my son barely looked human any longer. He was starting to no longer sound human either. The loud screams at night became increasingly guttural. Sounds that no boy could ever make. And if I stood outside his door at night, I'd sometimes hear him whispering to himself in between screaming. Words that I didn't understand. It was either gibberish or an entirely different language. A language that I had never heard before. And last night I woke up very late. And there was silence. I listened for my son, but I couldn't make out anything. I had the sense that something was watching me. A small amount of moonlight was sneaking in. Just enough for me to see something peering in at me around my bedroom door. It was my son. His horribly disfigured face just slightly lit up by a faint ray of light. He stared at me. And then he began whispering again. In that alien language. And I screamed as loud as I could. My son turned and ran back to his bedroom. And it is now hours later. And he still hasn't left that room. I didn't even try to go back to sleep again. I turned on my computer and I started writing out these very experiences. My package arrived early this morning. I also did some research, and I found out that this is a condition called teratophobia, a fear of disfigurement and disfigured people. And it got me thinking, has my son's disfigurement driven him crazy? Or am I suffering from extreme teratophobia, and my mind is exaggerating these experiences? I'm not sure. But what I do know is that my son cannot do this alone. And neither can I. It's become abundantly clear. A mother should do anything for her son, right? I can't fix his grotesque and horrifying appearance. but I can't make him feel less alone. To give him a partner. My son and I will be in it together. How better to comfort your fear than to specifically turn into an example of its focus? And I opened the package, and I looked at its content. Nitric acid. I wondered how I should splash it on my face. I didn't want to lose my eyesight in this process. I suppose I'll have to do a little bit more research. But I don't want to waste time either, because I would like to wake my son up this morning as his equal, and to show him that he is not alone, that together things won't be so scary, and things won't be so isolating. Things will be better. I've heard that quote before. There's no bitch on earth like a mother frightened for her kids. Well, maybe it's time my son and I, too, frightened the world back. Maybe we'll even grow to like it. We'll have to learn to like it. No matter what, we'll have to learn. When I was a little girl, I had a doll collection. A series of porcelain dolls, rag dolls, and puppets, as well as a china doll. Just the typical dolls that most little girls had. They were scattered around my room on cabinets, in closets, and my bedside table. My parents got rid of these dolls when I was 7. I've almost never been in the same room with a doll ever since. For over 20 years. My recollection of what happened is hazy at best. I've tried hard to bury it, and I rarely think about it at all. But given what's been happening lately, I feel I have to confront those old memories. I remember lying in bed in the dark, looking at these dolls. I know how it sounds for those listening to this, how ridiculous it seems. But I could swear that they were aware. They were just looking at me. It sounds like nothing strange, just a little girl's imagination playing tricks on her. But then things got weirder. One morning I had woken up and the dolls had moved around in different locations. My small porcelain doll in the dress was always kept on my cabinet. It had a red bow on the front. The dress was decorated with various types of flowers. The doll had its hair in a ponytail that hung down low over its left shoulder. And when I woke up in the morning, the doll was on my bedside table, right beside me. Even as a little girl, I didn't really believe that these dolls were moving. I thought maybe that I had switched them and just didn't remember. Or maybe that my mother had moved them for one reason during the night. So the next night I tried something. I didn't like the dolls looking at me, and so I turned them all to face the wall. And when I woke up in the morning, they had all turned around again, facing me. Now, this is the first time the whole situation made me really scared. Until then, I was more confused than anything. I decided to ask my mom if she'd been touching my dolls in the night. And she kind of laughed and said, "Why on earth would I do that?" And I laughed it off as well. But the truth was that I was now more terrified. I wanted nothing to do with those dolls. I put them in a large box and hid them in my closet. It was the first night that I had slept in weeks. When I came home from school that afternoon, my mom sat me down and said that she wanted to talk. "What's happening with your dolls?" she asked. "Why are you hiding them away? Why did you ask me if I was moving them before?" And I decided to tell her the truth. "My dolls are scaring me. They're moving in the night, and I don't want them in my room any longer." And my mom smiled. She told me that my imagination was just playing tricks on me. She said that she'd return the dolls to their shelves, but that she'd sleep with me in my bedroom that night, just to show me that it was okay. I didn't like the ideas of having the dolls back out, but I reluctantly agreed. We left the door open that night, just enough to let a little bit of light in. My mother teased me a bit. She joked that the dolls were moving, and I actually laughed. My mom being there made me feel a little bit better. But my mom fell asleep almost right away, and I felt alone in that room. I couldn't help but stare at the dolls. A china doll was almost right beside me on the bedside table. The doll in the purple dress was directly across from my bed, right there on the cabinet. And I looked at the purple doll. I tried hard to convince myself that nothing was happening, that I was just being silly. But then the doll raised its head and looked right at me. It blinked its eyes. Now, I would like all of you listening to imagine it. Is there a doll in your room where you're at right now? Or maybe a statue? Anything with a face that has eyes? Now stare at it. And now imagine right now that it is slowly turning its head and looking at you. That its eyes opened and blinked. I was horrified. I slowly touched my mom to shake her up. I looked to my left to where the china doll should have been. But it wasn't there. It moved somewhere. I looked back to the purple dress doll. It moved closer. I could see it ever so slightly inching towards me. And I screamed. As loud as I could. I remember my mom waking up and trying to calm me down, and she eventually started yelling at me, shaking me, but I wouldn't stop screaming. It was piercingly loud, and eventually my dad came into the bedroom. I remember my mother and him yelling at each other, trying to figure out what to do. My dad picked me up, trying to hold me, but I screamed and I clawed, I bit. I had completely lost control. I remember my dad yelling at my mother, trying to convince her of something, and she reluctantly agreed. And she raised a hand and she slapped me hard across the face. My screaming stopped just for a moment, and then the piercing wail continued. And she raised another arm and did it again, harder this time. And I finally stopped. "The dolls, Bobby! The dolls!" I cried to her. "Oh, I'm sorry. We couldn't get you to stop. I am so sorry." She hugged me again. And the dolls were taken away, never to be brought out again. It's been sort of weird since then. My parents and I have never talked about that night. Not once. The dolls were taken out of the house. No new ones were bought. None were ever brought in. It was an unspoken agreement between us. We all knew what had happened. We all knew that the dolls could never be in my presence. But we never spoke about it. I am now 29 and I have never slept in a room with a doll. I've barely even been in the same building as one. I wasn't even certain that those memories were real or not. But the phobia set in. I still had nightmares about them. Once when I was 11, I went to a friend's house for a sleepover. I hadn't really considered that she might have dolls. And I don't know why. Just slipped my mind for some reason. But when I got to her bedroom, I saw that she, of course, had a lot of dolls. Now I immediately went to the washroom and pretended that I was sick. I called my parents and had them come pick me up. After graduating high school, I thought about moving away to the university. But then I thought that I might get stuck with a roommate that might have a doll collection, or that even other students in other dorms would have them. No, I couldn't risk it. I'm married now, and even my husband doesn't really know the full story. I've told him on many occasions that I don't like dolls, and he just shrugs it off and he accepts it. But my husband and I also have a little girl. She's 7 years old now. Over the years, she has received a few dolls as gifts. What can I do? She's a little girl. She has dolls. How can I keep dolls away from a little girl? I stay in her room and I try to rarely go in there. Things were always fine in the daytime, even when I was a little girl. And I'm embarrassed to say it, but I am not sure that I've ever been in my daughter's room in the nighttime. I don't really believe the dolls would move. I just convinced myself that it was a phobia. There's even a name for it. Pediophobia. Lots of people are scared of strange things. This was my strange phobia. My daughter was preparing for her school play, and my husband helped her pick out her costume earlier that day. I hadn't seen it yet. My husband had let me know that he would be home very late. My daughter called down to me right before her bedtime, "Mommy, come see my costume." I walked up to her bedroom and opened the door. The lights were off for some reason. My eyes took a moment to adjust. Then I saw my daughter. She was standing perfectly still in the center of the room, not moving an inch. She wore a purple dress and a red ribbon on the front. Her hair was in a ponytail, hanging beside her left shoulder. And her head slowly, oh, so slowly, started turning to look at me. Her eyes blinked, and my daughter started inching closer. And so I slammed the door shut. I'm downstairs now, writing this out. I have absolutely no idea what to do next. I think I'm in shock. I can't just get rid of my daughter like I did with those dolls all those years ago. And what on earth is happening? Is she possessed? Is this just a coincidence? I have really no idea. But I hear her now. She's coming down the stairs. Very slowly. I am fighting the urge to scream like I did when I was a little girl. "Mother," she says. It doesn't sound like her voice. It doesn't even sound human. I need to submit this now. It's just pediophobia, right? It has to be. My daughter's costume slightly resembles the doll from my childhood, and my phobia triggered some overreaction. I'll go see her now. It will be okay. It's just pediophobia. Please, just let it be pediophobia. It's just pediophobia. It's just pediophobia. It starts with sweaty palms. You try your best to gather the immediate surroundings as you see the crowd growing. You look for the closest exits. It makes you feel dizzy and you start breathing heavily. You feel nauseous. You're far more anxious than you should be given the relative safety of the situation. But your mind goes to different places. You envision the crowd turning for some reason, or everyone rushing to the closest door as though their lives were on the line. The chaos that ensues. I've lived through it, and I wish to share it with you all today. Most people don't understand just how quickly a large orderly crowd can turn into absolute anarchy, of just how disgusting and appalling the entire mob becomes. They might read a headline, "For trampled at overcrowded event," and think that it sounded terrible. But they've never really thought about just how horrible such an experience would be. Some of us do think about it. Constantly. The moment that we're in anything close to being considered a crowd, it's precisely where our mind goes. And it terrifies us. It makes us scared of even existing. Enochlophobia, it's called. The fear of crowds. Or more specifically, the fear of what a crowd can be. I haven't always suffered from it. In fact, it is actually very new. 4 months ago is when I started feeling discomfort in a large crowd. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think something supernatural was involved. As though my phobia was actually just a premonition. But more to that later. When my phobia set in, I became a sort of recluse. I usually work from home and I rarely need to go to the office. When I did need to go out, I avoided rush hours and crowds. I didn't understand where the phobia came from, but I already seemed controlled by it. I felt as though I wasn't supposed to leave my house, no matter what. So I tried my best to remain there. But then the problem occurred. When I had no choice but to go to work midday during the regular hours, when I was stuck with all the people in the office, when I wasn't able to get a taxi home, when I was left with no choice but to take the subway, when a track was closed and I was detoured to Central Station, when 80,000 people left the concert. When 80,000 people left the concert. And things would get much worse. I was walking through the station when the mad rush of concert goers poured in. All my symptoms hit me at once. The sweating, the breathing, dizziness. I couldn't hold it off any longer and I vomited into a trash can. And still more people came. I was getting close to shoulder. People weren't even moving any longer. It was congestion and I was stuck. Yes, it was a terrible situation for me to be in, and yes, I would have done anything to avoid it. But I was coping with it best that I could. I kept telling myself that it wasn't the end of the world and that I would be fine. And then I heard the screaming. It was dozens of people about 150 feet away from me. Already people were starting to crowd together and push. And then the gunshots rang out. Mayhem ensued. The mob started rushing towards any exit that they could find. They were shouting and shrieking. And people around me pushed together so fast that I got swept away with them. At points, my feet weren't even touching the ground. We were all just moving as one large mass. And the gunshots rang out again. Even more hysteria crept into the crowd. And my phobia was sidetracked for the moment. I was starting to realize how much danger I was in. I entered survival mode. The chances of those bullets killing me were very slim. No. It was the mob that was the danger. And that's when I realized everyone around me was living my phobia. But when it's a real danger such as this, it's not a phobia at all. It's real. Your fear is real. Experience real. And you'll do whatever you can to survive. The mob of people quickly became congested as everyone poured towards the exits. We were all huddled together as more and more pushed into the mass. The closer you were to the exit, the more weight that was pushed against you. It was simply impossible for people to leave those tiny doors at the same speed that people were pushing towards them. The more frightened people became, the harder that they pushed. And the harder they pushed, the more weight that it put onto those near the exits. The more difficult it became for them to leave. The more difficult it made for them to draw breath. The tiny woman beside me looked at me like she was suffocating. "Are you all right?" I shouted at her. She looked back at me expressionless. She was in shock. I think she was starting to figure out that she might die right there. She spoke then. I still to this day am haunted by it. "This is all your fault," she said, and I couldn't make sense of it. Did she really say that? Or, as a result of my phobia, had I started hearing things? I'm taller than average and can see over most adults. I saw that my section of the crowd, maybe 500 or so, was trying to make it to a double-door exit. But very few people could leave at once. And very slowly, my group started making its way over. I almost lost my footing on a few occasions and would have fallen over if not for how close we were all huddled together. It took me a while to realize what I was almost tripping over. People. We were now trampling on the dozens of people who had fallen. I couldn't see or hear much in the commotion. But I noticed that some of the people we trampled were still alive. Some would even grab at our feet as we shuffled over them. And I stopped moving just for a moment and I looked down. And my right foot was on a woman's neck. 7 people or so were standing on her in some way. Another person's foot was on her jaw. For just a moment, Between all the crowd, our eyes locked. She was somehow impossibly still alive. And I saw panic and confusion looking back at me. Terror and horror. There's no way that we could let her up. There was just no room. We were all barely able to breathe, let alone help those who had fallen. A woman behind me was somehow still holding on to a tiny crying baby that looked about 6 months old. The people around her were trying the best that they could to guide her. And I looked away. I knew that she wouldn't be able to hold on too much longer. A man to my left had organized a few other men, and I heard them shout, 1, 2, 3! And they together pushed hard against the crowd. They were able to create a tiny bit of space for just a moment that the leading man was able to pull up from the ground what I assume was his daughter. She looked to be about 10. She was covered in blood. I don't think that she was alive. The man looked at me and pointed. The anguish on his face was overbearing.
Look what you've done! How dare you! Look what you've done!
And I looked around. In an instant, everything went silent. It felt like everyone in the room was staring at me. For just a moment. But then all the sounds and the movement returned in a blast. And the woman with the 6-month-old was now screaming, "My baby! I've lost my baby!" And I saw a man duck down in the crowd to try and get it. I didn't see him get back up. I doubt that he ever did. The woman kept shouting, "My baby," over and over.
Shut up!
A man yelled back at her.
Your baby's dead! Everyone is dead!
And I looked ahead and I saw the mob had finally pushed me close to the exit. But it wouldn't be easy to get out. So many people had fallen near the door's entrance that the only way out was to climb up a ramp of bodies. This is not a rare occurrence. If you have the stomach for it, Google such events. The station nightclub fire comes to mind. So many bodies pile up that the exits get blocked. And I started making my way up the ramp. If I had to estimate, I would say it was a pile of approximately 50 bodies. Mostly dead. Some still clinging to life. The man in front of me was elderly and he was moving slowly. Those that can't get up get buried below. And I know it's cold to say, but we weren't humans any longer. We were animals. Desperate for any way to get out. The people behind me caught up. They were about to climb over me and I could feel them. I had no other choice. I jumped onto the elderly man and I climbed over him. And then others followed behind me. And he was stuck. Permanently. He wouldn't get out. I made it to the top and had just enough room to squeeze through the doorframe to get out. I heard the old man shout from behind me, "You're not going anywhere!" But I was on the ground. I had made it. There was no turning back. "Get back here!" I heard him yell from behind me. And he kept shouting over and over, "You can't leave! You were supposed to die here! This was your fault!" But I left. To the sounds of hysteria. Screaming. Horror. Death. Thousands of people were trampled that day. 240 casualties. Only 4 dead from the shooting that started it all. Had those people really spoken to me like that? Said that it was my fault? That I was supposed to die there? I don't know. But it's what I remember. Maybe I was confronted so harshly with my biggest fear that my mind couldn't handle it. Maybe I only imagined that they said those things. And it's strange. Such a horrifying event should have made my phobia worse. But that's not what happened. My Enochlophobia ended that day. And I haven't had any problems in the months since. I only suffered from Enochlophobia for 4 months of my life. I sometimes think that it was a warning. It was a premonition of things to come. I somehow knew what was going to happen to me, and that my phobia was created as a precaution, to try and keep me at home and to protect me. And just the other day, another strange thing started occurring. I live on the 18th floor of my building and have never had a problem with heights. But if I look down now, I feel strange. It starts with sweaty palms. You try your best to gather the immediate surroundings as you see the ground getting closer. You look for the closest areas of support and stability. But the heights make you feel dizzy and you start breathing heavily. You feel nauseous. You're far more anxious than you should have been given the relative safety of the situation. But your mind goes to different places. You envision yourself starting to fall. Acrophobia, they call it. The fear of heights. I'd never suffered from it before. Not in the slightest. No. It started all at once that day in my apartment. Maybe it's another premonition. Maybe it's another warning. Or maybe, just maybe, I should get a new apartment. On the first floor. I suppose I should begin by explaining that I do have dissociative identity disorder. But it's not like what you might have seen in the movies or other forms of fiction. Neither of my personalities are caricatures like that. In fact, the two versions of myself don't even have glaringly different personalities. Sure, there are small differences. I, for example, have been told that I am more patient, open-minded, and sarcastic. My other self has a bit of a temper, has a dry sense of humor, and is quick to overreact. I can be long-winded and redundant, while he is compendious and quick to the point. But in day-to-day, just hanging out, our friends and family usually don't even know which one of us they're speaking with. I'm myself about 60% of the time, and my other self takes over about 40% of the time. We don't even know why I'm in control more than him. We're not even sure who the other me was. This has occurred for as long as either of us can recall. I usually stay at myself for 8 to 10 hours until he takes over. Then he lasts for about 5-ish hours or so. Every once in a while it's much longer or shorter, but it averages out to that. It sometimes will happen in a flash while one of us is in mid-sentence, and the other times it occurs while we're sleeping. We don't remember each other's experiences in the slightest. I'll be sitting on the couch watching TV, and then 5 hours later I'm somewhere else entirely, with no recollection as to what has occurred. I could go into far more details about our lives, about how we've tried to make education, employment, and relationships work under our circumstances. But this post isn't about that. Something strange has happened with my other self, and I'd like to share it here for feedback, support, or even advice. My other self and I started using the same smartphone, and we started years ago leaving messages to ourselves in a word processing app. It began with simple messages like, April 11th, 4:15 p.m. Mom called. I was too busy to answer. You should call her. Or, I have things to do at some point on Saturday, so don't you dare get drunk Friday night. We also started recording a budget there and listing things that we had purchased. We shared updated passwords there, and we would write down a transcription of any other people that we had met. In fact, I have to say a large part of my life is reading/recording these experiences from/to my other self. Last week is when the strangeness began. When I awoke in the morning, I looked at the messages from my other self. The following is the conversation that I had read. Him, June 2nd, 2:15 a.m. Has it been watching you at night as well? Me, June 2nd at 7:30 a.m. Has what been watching me? I haven't noticed anything. Him, June 2nd, 2:40 p.m. Yellow eyes. It peers at me from around the corner. Every corner. Now, I have no idea what to think. Was my other self starting to lose it? I told him that he should visit our psychiatrist and talk about it, but I'm not sure that he went. And then things got stranger. I woke up that night with the suspicion that something was watching me. I looked around my room carefully, looked at the corners for anything out of the ordinary. And I saw nothing. But I could sense that something might be there. I decided not to say anything about it. Maybe I was just spooked. I heard nothing more from him about it for the next few days, but then I woke one morning to another message from him, June 5th, 1:40 a.m. It's back. It's watching. It's watching. Me, June 5th at 6:20 a.m. I still haven't seen it. I looked. I really do think that you need help. I'm going to make an appointment for you. Him, June 5th at 2:40 p.m. He won't be able to help me. Me, June 5th, 9 p.m. Calm down. Write a note for me to read. Explain what precisely is happening. And when I awoke the next morning, I saw that he had left me a detailed message. This is what he wrote. I don't know what it is, but it's getting closer. It's around me far more often. It looks at me from the corner. I see it for only a moment, and then it backs away. Sometimes it's not the yellow eyes I see, but a scaly hand that quickly pulls away. Partly open doors quickly slam shut when I look at them. Or sometimes quietly open. This all happens just out of the corner of my eye. Never when I'm looking directly at it. It keeps getting closer. I don't know what will happen when it gets to me, but it keeps getting closer. It keeps getting closer. I read that message the morning of June 6th, and I haven't turned into my other self ever since. It has been over 40 straight days that I've stayed as myself. The longest it had ever been before that was 10 hours or so. I fear that I will never turn into him again, that he is no longer a part of me. Whatever it was that was haunting him, it got to him, and he no longer exists. My friends and family tell me that I should be happy, that I'm cured. But that's not how I feel at all. A part of me has died and I miss him. He is what made me unique. The two of us were a team and we worked so well together. I find myself crying sometimes, looking at my phone and the messages that we sent to one another. I wake every morning and immediately look to see if he left me a new message. Nothing would make me happier than to hear from him. And then finally I received one. It was last night after all this time. It was just one short message. July 17th, 5:40 a.m. It's coming for you. I don't know how it's possible. I don't know what sacrifice he did to make in order to give me that message. But I wish that he would give me some sort of advice about what I should do. Maybe he knows. Maybe he can help. Because I woke yesterday in the middle of the night, and from the corner of my eye, I saw the yellow eyes for just a moment. From around the corner, the scaly hands, and the doors opening and closing. It's already getting closer. It keeps getting closer.